They always called me when things were on fire. Not the literal kind, although once I did have to power down the east server room because a capacitor blew and started smoking near the firewall racks. No, people like Marlene and the rest of Behringer's upper floor came to me when the metaphorical flames started licking the walls. Client threatening to sue over corrupted data. Call Eli. Deadline pushed up 3 days? Eli will fix it. CFO's laptop died on a plane to Singapore with $500,000 in projections unsaved. I'd rebuilt it from a bootable thumb drive before they finished their in-flight meal. My name's Eli Mercer. I'm 58 years old. Until last week, I was senior systems architect at Behringer Analytics. 30 years of service. That's not an exaggeration. I started in '95 when the company was 5 people and a fax machine in a rented office above a dentist in Tucson. Back then I coded in silence and drank burnt coffee with no cream. No one knew what a cloud was. I watched Behringer go from running batch jobs on zip drives to managing predictive logistics for billion-dollar clients. I helped build the damn company. And then, on a Monday morning, I became obsolete. Marlene scheduled the meeting as a casual check-in. That's what the calendar invite said. I knew better. You don't get summoned to the 19th floor for casual anything, not when your badge doesn't even open that floor without prior approval. Her office hadn't changed. Minimalist, sterile. The only color was a ceramic bowl of green apples she never ate. She was sitting behind her desk, not standing to greet me. That was the first red flag. The second was the smile. Too tight, like she was trying to get it over with quickly. "I'll be direct, Eli," she said, folding her hands like a therapist about to break bad news. "You've been instrumental to Behringer's growth, truly, but it's time we evolve." I didn't respond. 30 years teaches you not to fill silence. It's a power thing. "You're a paper map in a GPS company," she added, like it was a compliment. Her eyes gleamed with self-congratulation, like she'd been workshopping that line all weekend. She didn't ask if I understood. She didn't offer me a transition package or mention HR. She told me, flat out, that her son Dylan would be stepping into my role, effective immediately. Dylan, 26, showed up at last year's holiday party in a suede jacket and no socks. He called me Chief when he couldn't remember my name. Once emailed a client a PowerPoint in Comic Sans. His resume was thinner than the crust on a vending machine pizza. "You'll be missed," Marlene said. I stood, nodded once, and handed her my key card. She reached for it like it was contaminated. I walked out without shaking her hand. My legs moved fine, no limping, no hesitation. But something inside me slowed, like gears grinding just slightly out of sync. That night, I didn't sleep. Not from rage. Rage is loud and sharp. This was quieter, duller. The kind of betrayal that doesn't scream, just settles into your bones like cold. I didn't tell my wife right away. What was I supposed to say? That I got replaced by nepotism in designer sneakers? That 30 years of sacrifice, missed birthdays, skipped vacations, canceled anniversaries, had been filed under outdated infrastructure? I told her I was taking some time off. She smiled, kissed my forehead, said it was long overdue. I didn't correct her. 5 days passed. No word from Behringer. I deleted their contacts, blocked their HR number, but I didn't touch the backups. Habit is stronger than hurt. Then I got the text. It was from Victor in finance. Reliable guy, mid-40s, spreadsheets for veins. We weren't close, but we'd shared enough late nights trying to track down misallocated expenses to build a kind of battlefield respect. "Did you delete Q4 backups before you left? Dylan can't find them." I stared at the screen. I hadn't. Of course I hadn't. They were archived, tagged, mirrored, triple encrypted. Just not where Dylan would ever think to look. He didn't know how to read my folder structure. Didn't even know what incremental sync meant. And that's when I understood something very clearly. They hadn't just replaced me. They'd handed a grenade to a child and pulled the pin. The first email came in at 8:17 a.m., subject line in all caps, "Urgent, Redwood invoice issue." It was from Jenna in accounts receivable, young, sharp, probably the only one left in that building who still had any reverence for process. I didn't open it right away. I didn't need to. I already knew what it was about. 3 weeks before I turned in my keycard, I'd cleaned the Q4 ledger like a crime scene. Line by line, formula by formula. There were minor mismatches in vendor billing codes, a duplicate PO number from a sync error in the old SAP feed, a few floating decimal anomalies that looked harmless until you remembered the scale of the contracts. I'd corrected it all, documented the corrections, archived the pre-clean version with a red tag in the file name, "Do Not Touch Final." Apparently, Dylan had touched it. The next email came from legal, then compliance, then another one from Redwood Logistics themselves, demanding to know why their year-end invoice showed $1.3 million in duplicate charges, including services they'd canceled in October. By 11 a.m., Victor forwarded a screenshot of Dylan's response to the Redwood escalation. "We're looking into it. Might be a residual cache error or sync latency from cloud rebalancing." There is no such thing as sync latency from cloud rebalancing. It's a salad of words that means absolutely nothing. But it sounded technical enough to keep the wolves at bay, for a moment. Marlene, of course, was nowhere to be found. She'd flown to Austin for leadership, innovation sessions, according to her out-of-office reply. More likely, she was attending some luxury networking event where people talked about disruption over artisanal cocktails. Dylan was left in charge. I watched the system rot in real time. The access controls I'd spent 2 decades refining. Multi-factor authentication, user-level versioning, weekly audit reports, had all been streamlined under Dylan's regime. Open logins across departments. Version control turned off because it slowed down collaboration. Confidential vendor data stored in Google Sheets with no encryption, no permission gating. The sandbox environment I'd kept sealed tight was now labeled Team Playground on the internal dashboard. HR sent out a cheerful memo around 3 p.m., congratulating Dylan on being the youngest ever department lead in Behringer history, with a photo of him holding a coffee mug that said, "Boss Life." I read it twice. I remembered the first year Marlene joined the company. Nervous, underprepared, too reliant on jargon. She'd been promoted from within marketing and didn't understand half the tools we used. I coached her anyway, helped her put together her first leadership deck when she froze up, backed her in a C-suite meeting when the CFO questioned her projections. She'd called me afterward, voice shaking, and said I'd saved her career. She returned the favor by handing it to her son and pushing me out the door. The junior analyst who'd shadowed me last spring sent me a message on LinkedIn that night. "Hey Eli, sorry they did you dirty. Dylan's losing it. Whole place is a mess." I stared at the message for a full minute, thumb hovering over the reply button. Then I locked my phone. I didn't text Victor back. Because sometimes you don't charge into a burning house. You don't waste your breath warning the people who lit the curtains on fire and then acted surprised when the walls started smoking. You wait. You let it burn. And when the smoke clears, you show the insurance adjuster the receipts. You show them who struck the match. They thought they could replace the architect with a decorator. Let them decorate the ashes. Wednesday at 10:17 a.m., I got a ping. It was a forwarded invoice from a name I hadn't seen in a few years. Chris Weldon, a vendor rep I used to deal with back when Behringer handled all its logistics modeling in-house. The kind of guy who didn't reach out unless something was off. I opened the attachment, and within 5 seconds, I saw it. It was one of mine. An Excel-based auto-pay tracker I'd built 6 years ago. Nothing fancy, but clean, efficient, and designed with protective macros that would flag duplicate invoices before payment was triggered. Only now, it was broken. Payment confirmations were being issued twice for the same entry. Several vendors, including Chris's firm, had already been overpaid. The real kicker? The macro still bore my structure, my naming conventions, even my signature tab logic. But the footer had been changed. Dylan was now listed as the point of contact, with a Gmail address he clearly thought looked professional. He'd tried to customize the spreadsheet, probably added a dashboard tab with bright colors and fake metrics to make it look more modern. In doing so, he'd corrupted the hidden formulas that controlled payment authentication. One accidental deletion and the whole thing collapsed. I closed the file and leaned back in my chair. It was the first time I'd smiled in weeks. That afternoon, I got a blind CC from someone in compliance, Carla Mendez. Quiet, competent, still sent thank you emails when people helped her. I'd mentored her back in 2012 during her first year out of college, walked her through the chaos of pre-merger audits. She'd always had a good instinct for pattern recognition. Her message was simple. Need clarification on Marlene's signature on these backdated files. Escalating internally. Attached were 3 PDF contract amendments, all bearing Marlene's name with digital timestamps that didn't match system logs. The files were edited last week, but backdated to mid-December, right before Dylan's promotions and right after I left. The dates weren't even masked properly. Whoever altered them didn't know how metadata worked. An internal audit had begun. Around 3 p.m., Victor called. I let it go to voicemail and later downloaded the audio. He didn't know I was recording, but legally it didn't matter. I wasn't in the company anymore. His message was rushed, low-voiced, like he didn't want to be overheard. Just found out Dylan permanently deleted the Q4 backups. Not moved, not archived, deleted. He said Marlene told him it was fine. We trust Dylan. Her exact words. Whole IT team scrambling now. That was enough. I opened my encrypted folder and pulled out a zip file labeled Behringer Archive, Jachir SVRB. The only complete, untouched mirror of Q4 financials existed in that file. I'd made it during my final week. Not because I anticipated chaos, but because I didn't trust their incompetence not to cost the company everything. Then I emailed Victor. Make sure they don't touch my archive drive. Bottom drawer, locked cabinet, server B. It's the only copy of the quarter's financials, protected under my clearance. Then I gave him the password. 16 characters, randomized, only ever written once. On a physical note, I shredded the day I walked out. Minutes later, I forwarded the recorded voicemail to an old friend. Richard Ye, attorney, former Fed compliance consultant, and the sharpest legal mind I've ever known. We hadn't worked together in years, but I knew exactly what he'd do with that recording and the audit CC from Carla. I didn't need to fight anymore. They were already burning. Marlene had tried to play politics with gasoline, and now the smoke was starting to drift into boardrooms, inboxes, and Slack threads. Dylan had turned trusted systems into ticking bombs, and soon, someone would be asked to explain how one spreadsheet mistake turned into a 7-figure liability. The fire wasn't the issue anymore. The smoke was, and it was seeping under every door in the building. I hadn't worn that suit since the last acquisition meeting, the one where we convinced 2 regional analytics firms to merge under Behringer's umbrella without hemorrhaging staff or alienating legacy clients. It still fit. Barely. A little snug in the shoulders, but it buttoned clean and straight. I stood taller in it, walked more deliberately. Funny how a suit can make you feel less like a discarded employee and more like a man who still has leverage. The receptionist was new, probably no older than Dylan. She asked if I had an appointment, voice light, smile polite. I gave her my name. Her fingers paused on the keyboard just long enough to register confusion. I didn't offer context. After a brief call upstairs, security buzzed me through. She told me to take the express elevator to the 14th floor. Perfect. The doors opened to hushed tones and too much cologne. A handful of board members stood clustered outside the glass-walled conference room, murmuring to each other while trying to look composed. Inside, the room lights were dimmed, the projector casting a cool blue glow over the long table. At the head of it sat Marlene. She looked like she'd aged 10 years in 10 days. The perfect blowout hair was flat now, and her face, usually shellacked in corporate calm, had lost all its gloss. Next to her was Dylan, shoulders hunched, eyes red. He looked like a boy who finally understood he wasn't in school anymore. The woman standing was Celeste Nguyen, lead auditor from the external compliance firm. Late 40s, compact, clinical. She held a printed stack of reports with color-coded tabs and a bright orange post-it near the top that read, Source Logs, EM, Dec 2023. My initials, in a font I'd used for 20 years. Celeste's voice didn't rise or waver. We've traced the payment automation errors to a modified macro, originally authored by Mr. Eli Mercer. The system integrity remained intact until user access permissions were escalated last quarter. She turned to me. Did you build the system Dylan dismantled? Yes. Did it contain safeguards to prevent unauthorized modification? Of course. Until admin rights were handed to a 26-year-old with no understanding of checksum logic, yes. There was no gloating in my voice, no satisfaction, just fact. Celeste continued, unbothered. We've also reviewed the metadata on these amended contracts. She clicked to the next slide. Digital timestamps show edits in January, yet the file dates claim they were finalized in December. The screen displayed Marlene's digital signature. The discrepancy was discovered by your own compliance officer. The internal audit has confirmed that these are backdated compliance reports. Marlene finally spoke, her voice dry and defensive. We were relying on legacy systems. Outdated infrastructure led to several versioning conflicts. It was never our intent to falsify records. Celeste raised an eyebrow. So the deleted Q4 backups were accidental? Marlene shifted. Dylan was under the impression that we had redundant systems in place. We trust our team. That last sentence landed like a lead balloon. Celeste turned to Dylan. Can you confirm you deleted the backups? He nodded, barely. I thought it would free up space. A silence settled so thick you could hear the HVAC cycle shift. I stood still, arms crossed. I didn't speak unless spoken to. That was by design. I wasn't here to defend or condemn. I was here as evidence. And yet this wasn't the end. Not yet. The board hadn't seen the internal Slack exports yet. The ones with Marlene telling Dylan, "Don't worry, old dogs don't learn new tricks." Eli was just good at looking busy. They hadn't seen the inquiry from Bloomberg, sitting in their comms team's inbox with the subject line, Behringer automation breach, comment request. They hadn't read the external impact report, detailing how 3 clients were already considering litigation due to duplicate payments and breached contract terms. But they would. Tomorrow. And tomorrow had teeth. The story broke at 7:42 a.m. I didn't have to look for it. It found me. Push notification, top of my feed. Tech firm under fire after son of CEO deletes 12 mailers in financials. Underneath the headline was a photo of the Behringer building, all steel and tinted glass, and a zoomed-in crop of Dylan standing at a company function, holding a beer like it might explain his decisions. The article didn't pull punches. It quoted anonymous sources inside the company, detailed the deleted backups, the invoice overpayments, and the audit findings. But the most damning section was a leaked Slack thread. Marlene, laughing with Dylan about old dogs and legacy baggage. My name wasn't redacted. By 10:15, the board had called an emergency session. A friend from inside texted me a single sentence. They're eating their own. By 11:30, Marlene's name was gone from the internal directory. Not suspended, not reassigned. Gone. No announcement, just erased. At 1:03 p.m., I got the call. The interim CEO introduced himself as Gerald Wexler, a turnaround specialist brought in by the board. Corporate life support. He asked if I'd come in to consult, help stabilize the back-end systems and client accounts. He used the word triage. I showed up an hour later, not in a suit this time, but in jeans and a dark button-down. They didn't need a symbol anymore. They needed a witness. Wexler was sharp, clean-cut, and already exhausted. He didn't pretend this was a warm welcome. We sat in a small glass office with a view of the parking lot. You built the systems? I did. And you warned them? No, I documented everything. They ignored it. He nodded. Would you consider coming back temporarily? Help us contain the breach, stabilize infrastructure, re-establish trust. I considered it. No. He paused, pen hovering over his notebook. May I ask why? Because this isn't a system issue, I said. This was ego, rot, and delusion. You can patch code, you can't patch that. He didn't argue. On the way out, I passed Dylan in the lobby. He was slumped on one of the leather benches, clutching a brown envelope, eyes locked on the marble floor like it might open up and swallow him. He didn't look up. Maybe he didn't recognize me without my badge. Maybe he didn't want to. I didn't say anything. But Marlene saw me. She was by the windows, arms folded, talking quietly to someone in HR or legal or whoever was left that would still make eye contact. When our eyes met, the conversation stopped. Her face was drawn, gray, drained of the manufactured confidence she used to wear like armor. There was a beat of silence. Then her lips moved. You did this. I buttoned my coat. No, I said. You did. I just kept the receipts. She watched me walk past, didn't follow, didn't call out. Just stood there, the building she tried to remake in her own image collapsing around her like a failed simulation. I stepped outside. The air smelled like ozone and distant rain, sharp and clean. Across the lot, a maintenance worker was removing nameplates from parking spots. One of them had her name. In my hand, I held my old key card. I hadn't used it in weeks, but I'd kept it in my wallet, tucked behind my license like a splinter of something I hadn't been ready to pull out. I held it between two fingers, turned it once in the sunlight, then walked to the nearest trash bin and dropped it in. It hit the bottom without a sound. Just dead weight. Just like a paper map. We always think betrayal comes like thunder, loud, shocking, impossible to ignore. But it's quieter than that. It's a whisper behind a closed door, a signature on a form, a deletion confirmed without a second thought. And revenge. Revenge isn't an explosion. It's precision, it's receipts. It's silence that arrives right before the gavel falls. Because in the end, nothing echoes louder than a system that exposes the truth. And nothing is heavier than being right.